Welcome to Podtendo's Legend of Zelda Retrospective. We're going to go in-depth into characters, game design, and thematical elements for the Legend of Zelda games for the Nintendo 64. Enjoy. Alright, welcome back to Podtendo's Legend of Zelda Retrospective. We're on to part 4 today, and we're in conclusions. So welcome to our Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time Retrospective. We're going to do a deep dive into thematical elements, gameplay, and game design. Look at some of the characters of this game that's been captivating gamers since 1998, and really take our time and enjoy this game that has become a cultural phenomenon. I'm your co-host, Mick, and I'm joined every episode by my lovely and talented co-host,
Tyson.
Nice. You notice that we do these big kind of overarching retrospectives that by the time you get to like kind of the end, like in part kind of 4s or 5s, or you're looking at the last couple episodes, it's like a big sigh of relief, and you're like, oh, I could really just enjoy it. Whereas it almost feels like a job up into this point.
I don't know. I don't think so. I think that for some games, yeah, maybe if we were doing games that we didn't like, but for the most part, we chose games that we really enjoy spending time around in. And I mean, like, we know these games in and out, so, or like, it's not like, it doesn't feel like a chore to me. It feels like you're just running around in a fun world, whether you're at the beginning of the game or the end of the game. I actually really prefer the beginning of the game.
Yeah.
Like there's lots of strong parts to it, but the ending's strong as well. So I think I lean one way more than the other.
All right, interesting. Yeah, not to like. I mean, we've only done 2, and this one and final. I mean, it's kind of nice to know. I think the hardest part for me is like figuring out the outline of like where to put stuff. And once the outline's done, I'm like, okay, good. I know I can just talk about this, and I can like, I know when to stop play sessions and like write notes and stuff. So once I figure that stuff out, it's a little bit better for me. But anyway, so in our 3rd episode, we primarily looked at the theme of change, which is the dumbest theme ever because every story basically involves change. We explored what happened when we pulled out the Master Sword from its resting place, traveled into the future 7 years, the design of the forest, fire, and water dungeons, and finally we talked about that darn horse. We also talked about the weirdo in the lakeside laboratory and finished talking about the theme of change. Okay, all right. Today we're going to look at the final 2 dungeons, time travel a lot, explore the game's design of Ganon's Tower's elemental shrine compared to the dungeons, it's a mouthful, and finally talk about that darn Sheik and Ganon. Didn't do a lot of diversifying. I said darn horse and darn Sheik. Come on, stupid writer. Yeah. It's almost like I should read them before I read them before I speak them out loud online. Anyways, so there you go. So Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, developed by Nintendo, sold 7.6 million copies. Pretty successful for a single game. It was released November 23rd, 1998. This game took us 27 hours to beat. When you find out how many times I played through this game, you're like, man, that was a lot of time you spent playing this game, you weirdo. And it's released on the N64, 3DS remake. There's a GameCube and a Wii, maybe a Wii U copy. Good stuff, Good stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think that, once this game got released, it was just continued to be released because they know it would sell. And a lot of people would continue to buy it. Because I think for a while there, this was the contender for, like, best game of all time. Obviously, that's been superseded in a lot of people's eyes. I would say the vast majority, but I think this game is like a landmark of the 3D shift, and it really, you don't really think about it, but like how long ago that this game was actually released. Like this video game can basically drive and vote and drink in the United States now, so that's pretty impressive to go back on it now and have it still feel like a modern 3D adventure game. So. Cool.
I mean, for 23 years, it does hold up not terribly. Obviously, they've refined some of the mechanics and just the way they design games, obviously, right? But yeah, overall not too bad. Not too bad. Anyway, so on to our level notes section. So with 3 adult dungeons complete, we get to do we have a little bit of freedom with where we want to go. And if we listen to Navi, she suggests we go to Kakariko Village for no reason. Like, hey, I was already there. I got a hook shot. Leave me alone. So, Kakariko Village, adult/child. So as we explore the village, nothing seems out of the ordinary. The windmill doesn't do anything special. The people aren't weirder than normal. And there is an unreachable area but kind of behind the graveyard. But how do we get to it? This was the speculation on the playground back in the day, because we would access the village from Death Mountain, which was probably the quickest route. If you approach from Hyrule Field, you will witness a cutscene of the village on fire. Sheik standing watching the well as the rigging, okay, that's what it's called, the rigging over the well, flies off and a shadow attacks him. It moves quietly around the city as we stand our ground, but are knocked out. We awaken and Sheik teaches us a new song, the Nocturne of Shadows. This will also have to learn the Song of Storms from the Man in the Windmill to continue. It's pretty exciting. I gave a little bit of a history, too, about how dumb I was when I was a kid and didn't know how to unlock this.
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of confusing, and if you aren't actually reading what the NPCs are saying, which a lot of the time was just how we played games back in the day. We just would show up, run around, try to figure it out ourselves, and then eventually, someone would actually read, use their eyes, and be like, wait a minute, what's this person actually trying to tell me? Because, there's lots of good hints in this game. I remember grabbing one of the chickens and discovering how to get past the wall barriers. You climb up to the windmill and everything. I thought that was groundbreaking. I was like, we were doing things that we should have never been able to figure out. It's or you could just walk into that one shop. So
Yeah, no, that's fair. You're right. If you kind of follow it the right way, but I do remember as a group or something, we were playing through this game, and it did just say go to Kakariko Village, and this thing happened. We're obviously anyways. So now that we're here, to progress, we have to go to the bottom of the well. So as a child, we can play the Song of Storm in the Windmill, which causes the man who taught us to learn it, which creates a paradox. So that's kind of neat. They have a little bit of time travel in there. It also drains the well and permits us access to this dungeon. We have to find a Triforce marking, play Zelda's Lullaby to drain the water further. We only need to find one key before fighting the boss of this area, Deadhead. Hands will grab you, and then this weird, awful, terrifying wiggly man comes out, and you have to try and wiggle free and attack his head. But after he's defeated, you gain the Lens of Truth, which reveals hidden items and gives us access to either of the two remaining adult dungeons.
Yeah, definitely the scariest boss in the game, I think.
Yeah, he's kind of creepy.
And especially since you're just running around as a dumb kid, you feel really weak, and you don't have the powers and the big sword and all that stuff. You're just kind of helpless, and then this thing that holds you and wrecks you. But yeah, I thought this was always a really cool area of the game. Good sound design, very creepy, very otherworldly, but it's a different type of otherworld, or Underworld, or the other side. It's very cool to see how they kind of go into it, and it almost feels like you're running around.
Well, it shows the darker side a little bit of this. Well, up to now has been a fairly nice world, right? Like Tyson said, kind of the underworld. There's kind of this weird twisted past almost that it's kind of revealing, and it does make you feel unsettling. And it is one of the tougher dungeons, right? If you want a challenge, try and collect everything in this area as a kid, rather than just kind of skipping through stuff, and get the skeletas and find the hidden chests and whatnot. Because there are some tougher enemies and a little bit tougher challenges. And if you think this game is too easy, wrap the bottom of the well, as opposed to just hit the song, pick up a key quick, fight, Deadhead, and then kind of move on. But, sometimes you're just I can't be bothered.
Yeah. Also, I don't know. I think the Lens of Truth is one of the best items in the game. Pretty cool. It kind of also gives you that aha moment, and then you're just oh man, I have so much to backtrack. If you aren't following a guide and you don't know this game inside and out, so very, very cool that it's this unlocks a big chunk of the game now.
Yeah, and now there's a debate where to go next. So according to, if you kind of look how the songs are laid out, you get the forest song, and then the fire song, and then the water song, and then you get the Nocturne of Shadows, and then you get the Requiem of Spirits. Hence, the Shadow Temple, in theory, should be the fourth dungeon. But if you look at the pattern of the spiritual stones that you get them, it goes forest, fire, water, spirit, shadow, light. So there's a little bit of a debate online, and because it's open-ended, I think it's shadow. Navi tells you to go Shadow, it makes sense that you go check out Ganon's lands kind of last type thing. So even from a narrative point of view, I think Shadow makes sense. So that's where we're going. So playing the Nocturne of Shadow grants us access to that area behind the graveyard we've been trying to reach. Hooray! There's a door that requires Din's Fire to open. So if you're playing on a minimalist run, this is the first time you actually need magic to advance. So you have to go back to Death Mountain, visit the Great Fairy, then you can go to Hyrule Castle, get Din's Fire. It's kind of neat. I was like, I actually got stuck and had to go finally talk to that damn fairy. So inside, we can explore behind some hidden walls. Fight Deadhead again. He's less hard because we're adults. Get the hover boots. Follow a linear path to a big open area, which has 2 explorable rooms. Collect a key. Follow the linear route until we find a boat. We play Zelda's Lullaby, which causes it to move. We fight 2 skeletons, explore 3 more rooms, and find the master key and a small key, and then it's boss time. Bongo Bongo is a creepy body that hangs from the ceiling with disembodied hands that beat on a big drum. You have to kind of shoot both hands. You turn on the lens of truth, reveal his eye, knock him out, and attack. Repeat, and you win. Hooray!
Yeah, not the hardest boss in the game. And I always thought that, like, he would be difficult. Mm-hmm. But you just throw in those Air Force Ones, man, and you're good. You're good.
See, I had some trouble when I just playing through my my latest playthrough just a couple days ago. And I don't know what was wrong. I don't know if it was just the controls were acting up a little bit or something, but it can be more difficult. But yeah, right. If you can keep them centered and shoot with your arrows, it's not very difficult.
Yeah. Well, I feel like, back in the day, if you actually had to use the N64 controller, this would be way harder because aiming with those joysticks was like, you know, throw it out the window. But like using my 2DS and stuff, it's not too bad.
Oh, it's definitely cleaned up, and that's one of the things they definitely clean up in the 3DS version. And normally, you're right, very simple. For some reason, I guess I just haven't played him for a while on the N64, and it's like on a scale of 10, he's maybe a 6 in terms of difficulty, but like manageable. Yeah. Now, going back to kind of our main point of this walkthrough, though, the level design of this dungeon is probably the worst in the game. It's one big linear hallway. If there's a locked door, there's another door beside it, and inside there's a key. So it kind of almost equates to why am I going to this other room just to solve this quick puzzle, grab a key, come back. You don't have to backtrack at all. It's not very good. Although I think the area and the aesthetics is really cool. There's these guillotines that slide up and down. There's dead bodies everywhere. It just kind of, I don't know, between I think the bottom of the well's torture areas to the man who sees the lens of truth. And I theorize that that's actually Deadhead, by the way. Hence why he says or he can see without the lens of truth, so he doesn't need it. So when he dies, he gives it to you as a gift. And then there's this weird path that if you kind of follow from the bottom of the well through the windmill, it takes you to the graveyard. And then there's this weird ritualistic shrine. I don't know. It's really creepy, and it's one of my favorite areas in the game. It's just the worst dungeon, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. I think aesthetically wise, it's a really cool area. Gameplay wise, it's kind of not the greatest. Yeah, I just still think back to the Forest Temple and how well designed that is. And then I can kind of compare it to this, where it doesn't really feel like you're solving too many puzzles or exploring, and there's a lot of unique rooms. It feels kind of very samey.
Well, and the problem is it doesn't use 3D space well, right? What is one part that you couldn't, if you were to turn this game into a 2D game, could you do it with the Shadow Temple? Yes?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, probably.
So I think that's kind of one of the things that kind of sucks with it too, right? And it's not like you have to use the lens of truth too often. There's a couple points, but it's not that once you know it, it's oh, that's easy.
Yeah, see, I think what they could have done is because it's all there's all these shrines and stuff and different lighting and all that things. This is a great time to make you bust out those different elemental arrows that you've been collecting. Do that, do an ice one and then the fire one and then I don't think you have the light one yet. But no. But it'd be nice if you kind of do those things, and kind of almost do a ritual to summon Bongo Bongo, but as opposed to just walk into his room and falling onto his drums and being hey, why don't you play these things? And I don't know.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's a good thought. I mean, again, it's one of those things where it's cool aesthetics. They kind of screwed up. I think they did a bad job anyways. Oh, and the other part of the debate, as I'm just kind of looking ahead in the notes, you do actually need the hover boots to complete the Spirit Temple, which you get in the Shadow Temple, which also leads people to believe that the Shadow Temple should be completed last. So, interesting. Anyways, but we're off to the Grudo Fortress / Haunted Desert. So now that we can use our long shot or Epona to get over the Gerudo Gorge, because the bridge is broken, infiltrate the fortress and free 4 Carpenter assistants. This will give us an official guest pass, and we become an official Gerudo. They're this like warrior tribe of women that live near a desert, and they don't like men. So we can explore the training grounds, archery game, and gain access to the Haunted Desert. Here we need the long shot to get across like this quicksand area, or I think you can use the hover boots, which kind of screws you up in randomizers because the hover boots unlocks the Spirit Temple, and I don't really think that way, so I don't know. Random food for thought. We can use the Lens of Truth to find a ghost, follow him to reach the Desert Colossus. We enter the Spirit Temple, find an immovable rock, and then outside, Sheik teaches us a final warp song, and we return as a child. All right, there, we belong.
Yeah. A lot happening. Yeah. We actually get to see, we kind of hang out where Ganon's from.
Yep.
See all that good stuff. Hang out with the Gerudos, which is like one of my favorite races in the game. And I think that they, in later iterations, like Breath of the Wild, they expanded on the whole like sand section, like so much better. Because it is a really unique, interesting area. Like it makes you really feels like you're running around, can't see where you're going. Yeah, I really like this area. I mean, I think the kind of weakest part is saving the Carpenters, but that is such a blip in what you have to actually do. It just kind of like starts the whole thing. And I like that there's a lot of variety. Like you unlock all the Carpenters, you do some like arrows. You actually like have to do. It's a different type of battling system where it's a little bit more aggressive.
Yeah.
So I think that takes a big step up, and if you're wanting to like experiment, this is a great time to do that. Kind of get your combat down. And I don't know about you, but I know you don't have the great Goron sword, but I'm loving that thing right now. So.
Oh yeah, you're right. In my one playthrough, I spoilers, I just played through a randomizer, and I had the great Goron sword, and yeah, it definitely like. Long distance jump attacks deal tons of damage, and I'm like, yeah. And you're right, it is kind of nice because it adds that extra element. So we were talking in the last episode how it kind of seems like you just get to the Fire Temple and go. And I think one of the arguments is it's like supposed to be like one of the beginner dungeons. But still, it's kind of nice to have this like side section, right? So it's almost an area in itself to have like travel around, and there's stealth. And stealth in 3D wasn't really done before. Well, a little bit in Metal Gear Solid. So it's like taking mechanics from those other games, and I think that's kind of neat. It's a good puzzle, and pretty much every time I play it, I get lost somewhere. I get to 3 Carpenters, and I'm like, where's that 4th one? Damn it. And I try and do it like without getting caught, and then you obviously get caught, and you're like, oh man, this is like kind of challenging. It's good, right? It's good, but no, it is kind of neat. So, how about Spirit Temple as a child? And now we have to play as a child, right? So it's that extra added step. So it's Gerudo's Fortress, then the Spirit Temple as a child, then the Spirit Temple. So it's like 3 beats, whereas the Fire Temple was just Fire Temple, right? So I think it just kind of added gameplay, right? Which is probably one of those things you like look fondly to this part of the game. And you're like, oh, that's fun.
Yeah, this is a really strong section of the game for sure. And I think that like it's almost interesting how they do it in reverse of the Shadow Temple, where you do the kid section and then you do the adult section, but you almost like unlock the dungeon as the adult, and then you do like the kid section, but then there's like the bonus you actually have to go back and clear it as the adult. So
yeah,
it's like they're building on it, and I feel like this is probably one of the strongest like laid out dungeons, not laid out like actually like structure of the dungeon, but like sequencing to get to the dungeon is fantastic. So
yeah, I agree. I forgot to read my little notes section. I was just going to move on. Like again, what a neat area. So the River of Quicksand was probably an actual river at some point, where they kind of moved stones for the temple, right? So if you look at the geography and you're like, how did they build this big structure in the middle of a desert? Well, I mean, the river was there was probably a river, and they floated stuff down the river at some point, and over time it became quicksand. There you go. And I have another weird theory that Bongo Bongo is the shadow spiritual beast. similar to kind of Valvagia, and Morpha is actually a Zora egg that has been fused with Ganon's evil. So if you kind of look at them, they're all some type of like spiritual creature, and Ganon just corrupted them, which leaves Twinrova to be the basis of the temple itself. So it's called the Goddess of the Sand. It's this giant statue. It's a female race. And what if Twinrova, spoilers, it's kind of like there's these two little witches. When they fuse together, they become this big, beautiful woman. And we see her kind of like bust and like these statues of her a couple times. So like, what if she's actually this like spiritual beast of spirit or something like that controls the land, which is why Nabooru, again spoilers, becomes the sage or the spirit stage. Interesting, right?
I think there's lots of cool speculations that you can kind of go with this, because if you look at just the temples themselves, like what do they kind of represent? And that gentleman's video from the first retrospective, or I think second, where we dove into the forest temple, and he kind of like made me actually like question like why are these temples here? And like looking at the spirit temple, it almost feels like maybe this wasn't a big barren desert at some point. Maybe this actually was like a big part of the kingdom, because like there's lots of architecture, and it seems like the most developed area, but it's also like the most barren now. So
it's ancient, right? And as the vegetation or as people overtook the land, a desert kind of grow in, right? That's kind of how those things work through histories.
Yeah, but I mean, like, even there's just like random rock structures of like things that could have been, and you're just like, I feel like this used to be a big grand kingdom, and you're just kind of like seeing the absolute devastation, like generations and generations and generations, to a point where like they've even like forgotten their own history. Because like,
well, yeah, and it's probably an ancient race, and Hylians probably moved into this area, right? Like Hylians probably didn't live in this for thousands and thousands of years, right? Like they're probably transplants from somewhere else.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of like this. This is a really fun area. This is like,
yeah, I think it just adds a lot more lore and kind of like lets your imagination grow, which is kind of neat. So now we can actually move on to the Spirit Temple, though. So we return as a child. We meet Nabooru, spoiler from earlier, Ganondorf second in command, and we were asked to retrieve the silver gauntlets for her. So we venture into the dungeon. We have to kind of circle around, find a key, and climb up to a sun puzzle, drop a statue on a switch, light some torches, and kill some Beamos. This will give us access to the boss, Iron Knuckles. One of the better bosses in the game. You kind of have to avoid her swings and lay into her with your swords or bomb chews, and afterwards we collect the silver gauntlets, and we watch as two witches imprison Nabooru, and the owl returns, and he's like, oh, something sands, oh, time, blah. Stupid owl.
Yep. Man, that owl's the worst. Pretty cool, though. Like, I like how this is a very like storied dungeon. Like, there's lots of narrative going on. Whereas you compare it to some of the other dungeons where it's like you'll talk to somebody in the village and they might say, "Hey, go check that out," and then you come back after completing it. It's like, "Oh, hey, this thing happened randomly."
Yeah.
And it's almost like there's no story going on. But here it's like you kind of get introduced to a bunch of characters. And I think it's just like really cool, and to have the Iron Knuckle that's like a classic Zelda villain or enemy like show up, but in a completely revamped style is really fresh. I like this a lot. So
sweet, and I mean it's interesting, right? So like we saw Darunia in the Fire Temple, and he just goes and fights the boss and dies. You see Princess Ruto, and she's like, "Hello, I'm just going to go up here," and then disappear for some reason. And this again, we see a third stage in this temple, but it's kind of like in the past, so of course we don't run into her in the future, and it's almost the only one that makes sense, like where she goes. Whereas where the frick does Princess Ruto go in the water temple?
Just disappears off screen.
Yeah, and I mean, you want good poetry. You should have had to like work alongside Princess Ruto for a while until she was captured, just like you did inside Jabu Jabu, right? And you'd get those parallels between the two water dungeons. But anyways, I said, much like the bottom of the well, it's kind of short. The best use of time travel, so the fact that we have to explore the left side of the dungeon, and there's some areas that are actually inaccessible to adults, Link, and we end up in this big throne room. It's not really a throne room, but there's this big kind of shrine inside the temple, and you visit as both adult and child. That's really fascinating. But anyway, so we return to the temple as an adult. So with the silver gauntlets, we can push a block, collect some rubies to get a key, climb a wall, and uncover some light. Then we explore the inside of the statue room to find a key. We can now burn some floating mummies, solve a switch puzzle, find another iron knuckles, and get a mirror shield. This helps us solve 3 more light/mirror puzzles. Find the master key and lower a platform into the statue room. We can use the light to burn off the face of the statue, gain access to the boss door, and fight another iron knuckles, which turns out to be a captured Naburu. So you're like, oh, that's where she went. Again, like Tyson said, there's a good narrative throughout this dungeon, and Princess Gerudo just doesn't randomly exist, so not bad.
And it's almost interesting because, I mean, gosh, I just like, I like exploring this dungeon. It's got good tunes. It's got good vibes. Like the puzzles feel rewarding. Like when you actually get to melt the face, it feels like you're doing things, and actually directing the light isn't like an irritating puzzle. There's not like little things that like you're on a ticking time bomb or anything like that. You kind of like take your time.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like you get your, like with the giant Goron sword, the master sword, the mirror shield, the hover boots. You just feel really like pimp when you're running around with all your different types of tunics right now. So this is just a good feeling, good feel parts of the game. So
it's not bad. It's not bad. Anyway, so we're on to the boss. So the Twin Rova. So you start out by reflecting the 2 witches' spells back at each other. It's a great mechanic, like really well. It's not just hold Z and stab. You have to actually like be able to move around before they combine into one big woman. She shoots either fire and ice at you, which you have to charge up on your shield 3 times. Kind of weird. You only do it in this fight and nowhere else. Kind of weird game design. And then you unleash hell on her. I really like this dungeon. It's great. Maybe the best boss fight in the game. And it's just a shame that the mechanics of this game don't allow for more, right? So the fact that you're a child Link and you have to play the Song of Time, go to the Temple of Time, grab the Master Sword, play the Requiem of Spirits, go back to the desert, go inside. Whereas, and I mean, it's been outlined before, but like A Link to the Past, use your mirror and you switch between the 2 worlds, right? So, I mean, the fact that there wasn't a faster mechanic just to switch back and forth, I think would have been really cool. And, like, revolution. This might be one of the greatest games of all time, bar none, if they would have done that. I mean, it's already strong, and it's supposed to be an adventure, and it's supposed to be an epic story, and it's not supposed to be fast. But, like, it's not bad, It's not bad.
Yeah, I mean, Breath of the Wild 2, if they could just incorporate that somehow, like a light and dark world where you can flip between them, I'm telling you, that'd be something next level. Yeah, it's a little bit of a maintenance pain in the butt. And I mean, I'll gripe about the gauntlets. I think that they're kind of an underwhelming item. It's like silver, only to just like immediately get replaced. So I feel like it's it's like the scales all over again. Like you can now dive for 7 seconds. You can now dive for 10 seconds. Just once you get the first upgrade, you're like, cool. Do I need the second one? No, not really, but I guess I have it now because game tells me I need it.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you'll see that. So when we talk about the randomizers, as opposed to Link to the Past, where every item has multiple uses and there's like little dungeons in the overworld or puzzles in the overworld and dungeons that use just random weapons. And you're like, oh, I wouldn't even think to use that. Or like, oh, I guess that has multiple purposes. Where, like, what does the gold gauntlet unlock? Or what does the silver gauntlet unlock? Nothing, right? So it is kind of, I don't know.
Further in the level, yeah, that's about it. You can move that one block.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, that's disappointing. I mean, I look now at silver hands, so that's neat. Anyways, now that we're returning, we can return to the Temple of Time. So after collecting the final medallions, Rauru tells us to head back to the Temple of Time. Sheik meets us there, reveals that it's Princess Zelda. What? She tells us that she used the Triforce, that the Triforce separated into 3 parts when Ganondorf entered the Sacred Realm, and the other 2 parts are in her and us. She gives us the light arrows just before Ganondorf captures her and tells us to come to his castle. Oh no, what a twist. Back in the day, this was like, there was like a general confusion as like, who is Sheik? And like, where was Zelda? I think that's a pretty good job, right, for this older game. I mean, the internet would ruin it right away. It's hard to do mysteries. So, I mean, like, that was pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, I think they did a very interesting, like, they didn't tip their hat in too many ways. I mean, the Ocarina, if you were paying attention, might have triggered something. But, you know what? I think everybody liked Sheik. Cool character, cool game design. not game design, cool character, cool like story integration. I think that it was a neat start to a character that eventually kind of got like mixed into Smash Bros. And I'm always thankful for that. Yeah, I almost wish that there was a little bit more going on, but it does feel like at least Zelda was kicking around in this one as opposed to just standing in a temple.
Oh, exactly. And like standing next to the sage and it's like, oh, I'm safe. Oh, I have no agency. I'm just a girl. Oh. So it was nice.
The same thing forever.
Yeah. Great. Awesome. Good job, team. Yes. Yeah. And I applaud those things too, right? So, but pretty much that's it. I mean, obviously you can collect heart pieces and skeltas and get extra items. But if you're just like, I just want to beat this game. I want to save the world. That's my job. That's what we're doing. That's kind of what we're doing because we're going to go right to Ganon's tower. So we can head to the ruins of Hyrule Castle, be surprised that it's now just like this floating castle above this molten pit. And you're like, oh, that's going to be hard to clean up. And the sages will unlock a magical gate. What do you want to call it? Drawbridge? Bridge? Let's call it a bridge. And gets us to Ganon's tower. Inside, there's a center tower, and we get, is it 6? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 different chambers or barriers we get to dispel. So the way I'm doing this is I want to look at kind of the original design of the level that they're mirroring. So like the Forest Temple, for example, versus the Forest Chamber, I think is what I've called it in the notes. And we can kind of just talk about like what looks better, right? So that's kind of our game that we're playing. Make sense?
Makes sense.
All right, so we'll start Forest Temple versus Forest Chamber. So we go from one of the better temples in the game to we fight a wolf. There's some wind puzzles, probably a holdover from the defunct Wind Temple concept, and then we destroy the barrier. So, comparison, I would say the Forest Temple is better.
Oh yeah. Way more interesting. Why go with a wolf? If you went with the Poe here, you got to fight in chance.
Yeah, all right.
Like I understand that the chamber has like a little bit to do with it, but it's like, come on, the whole thing was about Poes. The outside had wolves.
Wolves live in the forest?
They were in the forest. They were in the forest leading up to the temple.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, good point. All right. How about Fire Temple versus the Fire Chamber? So one of the more maze-like temples that on first playthrough does seem like vast and holds its fair share of secrets, to a ruby-collecting hot room that requires hover boots and the gold gauntlets to complete.
Since the
I don't...
temple was kind of meh, I almost want to kind of lean towards the fire chamber because it's kind of it's neat. There's lots of like it's a little bit more puzzle solvy.
Well, you can't beat it. Like you get to this big rock and you're like, hey, how do I destroy this rock? And you throw bombs at it and you're like, I just got these gauntlets, maybe they can do something. And you're like, what the frick? And it is kind of like a cool kink in the puzzle where you're like, I guess I'll have to come back here because obviously you're missing something. Like you just can't complete it. And it's like, so that's kind of neat. How about onto the Water Temple versus Water Chamber? So this isn't a fair fight. The best dungeon in 3D Zelda versus some ice cavern push blocks.
Well, again, it's like I feel like the ice mechanic and pushing blocks isn't that interesting.
Yeah.
Like it seems like a very lazy puzzle to just slap in there. So yeah, like we'll go Water Temple on this one.
All right, nice. How about the Shadow Temple versus the Shadow Chamber? So one of the worst super linear dungeons of the game versus light a torch puzzle area. But you do get the gold gauntlets here, which unlock the light chamber and gives you double defense, as well as now we can complete the fire chamber. So that's kind of exciting.
Yeah. Both are kind of like meh. Like it almost feels like this one was just added in there because it's literally like, here, now you have gold, so now you can open that block. You're like,
yeah. And I do think that you can actually like get through this without getting the gold gauntlet, which is kind of neat, right? And that's I almost want to. Yeah, it's a tough call. I think the aesthetics of the Spirit or the Shadow Temple override the aesthetics of this room.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I'll give to the temple better soundtrack for sure.
All right, okay, so 2 left. I wasn't keeping score. We could probably go back and figure this out. So where are we at right now? So Forest Temple, Chamber, Water Temple. So we're 3-1 for temples right now. So it's going to be a hell of a comeback for a tie. So Spirit Temple. So the best time travel dungeon where both child and adult are needed to cover or overcome this trial, or a room with some BMOs, Another with you need some bomb chews. It's kind of a boring puzzle, but it's like good for the 3D space. So that's what we're up against. Wonder who's going to take this one.
Oh, I gotta go with the temple on this one. I can't not. That's one of my favorite temples. Not my favorite, but a bomb chew puzzle, and I think one sun that turns.
Yeah. Or yeah. Like rolling rocks, they were like, man, that was the best mechanic. Remember at the beginning of the game when that was like the first obstacle you had to overcome? What if there was 2 rolling rocks in a room? You're like, that was easy then. It's easy now. Stupid. All right, so I think Temples won this one. At least they're up 4-1. Let's see if the Light Temple versus the Light Chamber. So one has a big room that requires 3 spiritual stones to enter a door so you can get the Master Sword. The other has a room with invisible spiders, a chest that is revealed by playing Zelda's Lullaby, and this is where and a rolling boulders. Yes, like the area from where we got the Kokiri sword. Eh?
So a giant room that essentially just acts as a loading zone.
Yeah.
Ours is a small barrier.
Yeah.
You know what? I think both are slight hurdles in our path, but considering I didn't really think about your gripe until like you brought up why don't we just have a mirror in this game? You're right. Why don't we just have a mirror in this game? So I think I got to go with the Light Chamber, just because the Light Temple is essentially a loading zone.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a cool aura. It's like, oh, this is like our church, I guess. Really, it's a church that no one goes to except for a little boy. They don't have pews in it, which is strange.
Yeah, it's weird.
I mean, it's not a good church. Well, I guess actually, you know what? No. Anyways, maybe they're like in between. Maybe they're getting like the carpenters are working on them or something. Okay. Well, there you go. So interesting concepts. If you could have a do-over on this game, I would say maybe make these challenges like a little bit greater. Right?
Yeah. And I get that they're trying to make it a little bit thematic. In my eyes, I think you throw out the whole like, let's show you what you've done for the 3rd time. It's like, no, we've done this. Let's move on. Give me something interesting. Like maybe give me like some puzzle solving, like a water temple that needs to be solved using like the forest stuff,
or how about mini bosses that you need the for example, the water temple would be like a long shot, so you have to hook shot around a room to hit switches to deal damage to a boss as he chases you. How about an enemy that can only be damaged with the Megaton hammer in the fire area? How about an enemy you have to shoot with arrows? How about an enemy that something, I don't know.
No, you could do like arrows for the forest, like chase around some foes.
Reflect some lights.
For shadow, you would have to use like the lens of truth. Hover. And then for the spirit, you finally use something with the freaking gauntlets. Maybe you push some blocks, since you love pushing blocks so much. I
see. Something like you stun by like you shine light into his eyes, and then you pick him up and you throw him. That might be a boss in the Wind Waker you just described, by the way.
Hey, well, I'm proud of me.
All right, Good job, team. Nice. So now, where are we at? Okay, so with the barrier, so all the barriers are dispelled. We can now climb into the middle tower, fight some Dinophosos, some skeletons before the big bad himself, Ganon. So Ganondorf. So we've been trained to fight him pretty much since we fought Phantom Ganon way back in like 2 episodes ago or something. I don't know. In the Forest Temple, you hit his ball of energy back to him tennis style. When he is hit, use light arrows to stun him, and you unleash hell. Now that he is defeated, do you want to talk about that fight?
You know, it's kind of underwhelming. It's got some, like, I mean, I think the first time, I'll touch on it quick. I think the first time we fought this one, I think you were fighting him, and I think a couple, like, our friends were over, and we were all watching you, and the stress was on about the hitting that tennis style timing, and I think you nailed it. So I think the first time I watched this was a success, and I believe you were at the helm. So well done.
Sweet. Nice. And this, we can't use Z targeting, which is different from all the other bosses in the game, but like it's not super complicated. If he moved around the room and there was like platforming to do, but he just kind of stays in the middle. So again, one of those things with game design could have made it just a little bit more complicated to like how do you navigate around the room without Z targeting, right? They take away the one thing you've used all game, but alas, I'm just going to read through these last two paragraphs and then we can talk about it. So now that Ganon is defeated, we can escape with Zelda as the tower collapses. She will pause if you're hit by debris, and you're on a time limit. So, I mean, I guess you could fail, and you do have to defeat some skeletons. So, like, you're kind of like, oh, I'm rushing, oh no. And as the rebel settles, we hear a noise, and we go to investigate to find the boss, Ganon! So now Ganondorf has turned into this giant pig monster like we recognize from the original, and you're like, I know that guy. You lose your Master Sword, so you either have to use the big Goron sword or light arrows to hit him. I had 30 arrows and only half a magic bar, and I was able to unleash light arrows for a bit, roll around, and then there's like debris, and he'll hit the debris, and you collect magic. So it's nice that they didn't kind of soft lock you there, and you're like, that's nice. Halfway through the fight, though, he kind of stumbles. You can regain the Master Sword at this point, carry on with the strategy until he's stunned again, and then you deliver the final blow by sticking your Master Sword right in between his eyes and killing him. Hooray!
Yeah, once you get your sword back, it's not so bad. Pretty cool that he goes from Ganondorf to Ganon, and thus starting another argument on the playground. But yeah, very cool. He's like, yeah, you run around him once you get the sword and just stay behind his tail, and he's pretty easy. But it's nice that, like, you know, Zelda, it kind of helps you win or defeat him, and he shows his like quote unquote true form.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that like this was a very Ganon's Tower, like, you know, it's a pretty decent ending to the game. It feels a little bit, you know, not so connected, but I do like the big boss battle at the end.
Yeah.
Kind of gives you the fake out, like, oh, you did it, and you're like, no, there's no way this is over.
Concrete, it makes sense if you look at the structure of the outside. It's all confined in the 3D space. It's epic for the time. Again, this is 23 years ago. The fact they were able to create something that's this scale, that's this cool, is kind of neat, right? It's not that difficult. Of course, it's not that difficult. It's no video game is that difficult to be played enough, right? Like, you know what you're doing. But yeah, I think it holds up. Right? It's one of those things. I don't often get to this part. Like, if I'm playing this, usually I beat all the temples, and I'm like, close enough. I know I could beat Ganon, right? It's kind of a foregone conclusion. So it is nice when I see it through to completion. I probably beat it enough, and it was one of those things, like, as a kid, every night after school for like a month, I'd beat this game, and I'm like, all right, after 30 times, I never need to do this one again. So that's fun. But how about the ending of this fun adventure? And then we're through the game. It was a fun, part 4? 4 hours of playing a game in a podcast. Anyways, ending. So we are shown a blue-black background area. Zelda thanks us for our courage and offers to send us back to our original timeline before anything happens. We are shown areas from the future, now restored by completing empty. Oh, that are restored but completely empty. Epona is shown running across Hyrule Field alone, before we join all the NPCs that are having a party at Long Long Ranch. They all look happy, except for Mido, who sits off to the side with King Zora. As 5 lights streak across the sky, it turns out that these are the sages who are now looking over the protected Hyrule from Death Mountain. We are shown arriving in the Temple of Time as Child Link. Navi parts ways with us, which is super critical, and we see the final scene that shows us entering the courtyard and confronting Princess Zelda.
I mean, this is a little bittersweet ending. Feels like you saved the day, but there was a lot of losses kind of along the way, and I think it just kind of like goes to like credit that they didn't want to like, oh, by the way, no, all the sages are back, everybody's all good. It's like, no, there was some people were lost along the way, and don't forget about them. And I think this change at the end really leaves a big mark on the series and franchise and directions of where they'll take the game. So
I mean, it changed the whole series as a whole, right? We got the split timeline theory coming from this. It's kind of a big pivotal moment. Really ballsy that they kind of decided to wrap up a time travel story in this manner. right? I had a question at some point. I don't know if it comes up, but I looked into it. It turns out that Zelda sends us back to before we talked to Zelda initially. So us going into the courtyard at the end is us now going with our future knowledge, telling Zelda what happens, and then she kind of acts accordingly, and Ganondorf is arrested before he can kind of overthrow anything, right? So super fascinating from a narrative point of view. Not the greatest, but I mean, it's a bold direction, right? That I don't think a lot of people saw coming. I think it does hold up today, right? Obviously, we could sit here and be like, well, I think they should do this and do this to make it better. Those are just future games, right? Like, essentially the things they created here, they improved on in future games, and they made it better. This game is still one of the pinnacle seminal experiences in video game history, right? And going back and just kind of exploring it and getting to relive it multiple parts, right? Like, we've now been playing this game for months. We're going to play it next month too. Like, we're playing this game again once more. So it's a good experience, and I'm glad we kind of went through and saw it through, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, this game sequel baited before sequel baiting was a thing.
Yeah.
Like this was the after credit scene that it's like jump started the whole like 3D Zelda world. So very awesome. And I just think that like there's like so many movies nowadays that will sequel bait, so it's just like kind of ingrained in us. But this was kind of a new thing, and I don't even think that they really like thought too much about, oh well, let's have Navi leave so we can leave this open. It was more like, no, let's send Link back, and you know, Navi will go do her own thing, and everybody kind of like will wrap up everybody's story. But like inadvertently, they left it open for a sequel. So very cool. I love that they did that. It shows that they tried to make this its own standalone story. And if you only play this game and you don't play Majora's Mask, you're not like you have to play Majora's Mask. You got the complete experience by just playing this. So really cool. And there's two distinct sequels that come out of this game, right? Majora's Mask and Wind Waker, right? Like, play the beginning of Wind Waker, you're like, oh, interesting. That's kind of what happens in the future. Neat. Weird. Okay. So that kind of wraps up our final playthrough of Ocarina of Time. Like I said, we are looking at a randomizer. I've played through it. Spoilers alert. I don't know if Tyson plans to play through one, not just a little bit, watch some on YouTube or something like that. But that's kind of what we're going through there. So it's good. It's a good nail in the coffin. We still have a mysterious area of Hyrule because they're not done. And then apparently we're looking at allies and villains, and then we're done. So that's exciting. Yeah. It's a strong ending to this game, but we're still not done. We still got lots to go. So this game is just getting us started.
Cool, yeah. So, about mysterious areas of Hyrule. Do. The fact that I don't want to talk about the Kakariko Village / bottom of the well / graveyard, or the totally awesome desert areas. I guess I have to find a different weird area. Oh, I see. So I just said I don't want to talk about those, even though, again, if you look at the structure and the geography of the bottom of the well to this weird tunnel that leads from the windmill to the graveyard, there's something there, and it's like kind of creepy. But apparently we're going to talk about something we didn't really touch on, one of the side quests. So the Pole Collector. So at the castle gates of Hyrule in the adult timeline, you go inside it. It used to be a guardhouse, but now there's just this weird man with a stick who you can sell big pose to, receive 100 rupees and 100 points. Collect 1,000 points and you will get a 4th bottle. The theory is, if you go into the guardhouse as a child, there's a guard standing in the same corner where the Poe Collector is, and he sits there and he rumbles something about how boring the world is, and he wishes something exciting or interesting or dark would happen. That would make him happy. So the theory is, when Ganon takes over, he jumps, switches sides, joins this evil army, and is bestowed the power of collecting ghosts. Kind of creepy.
Very, very. And I think that, I like this theory because that guard, he's like, because he kind of stands out to you, like no other guard kind of just like randomly says this stuff. But then you have to go around and you have to collect all those pose. And I was thinking, I was like, who would those pose be? Because they're just ghosts. And I was like, maybe they're like other guards, and this guy is like paying you to hunt down the ghosts of former guards that Ganon's cursed into pose or whatever. So.
Shit, that's creepy. And they like died out on the field in a battle?
Yep. That's my theory.
Cool. Yeah, no, I like that. I haven't heard that addition to it, but that's a good add-on. I kind of like that. Makes sense. They're like big deals. Huh.
Right.
All right. Well then.
And I mean, he's twisted enough that I feel like he's collecting all his old dead friends subconsciously.
Creepy.
Yeah, exactly.
How creepy. Scary. All right. And then how about a final allies and villains? Again, if you listen to Final Fantasy VII last year, we did kind of break down characters. There's a lot more narrative there. The characters are way more fleshed out. Here they're very paint by numbers, nothing super special. So I wasn't going to do character studies specifically for this game. And I kind of didn't have anything. So it's just a weird thing where I talk about Ganon and Zelda, apparently. So before the internet times, we had the playground where we'd meet other like-minded individuals and discuss our favorite games. One topic that was on everyone's mind was, who's Sheik? Why was he helping you? And what was his end game? Shortly thereafter, our theories were debunked, and it was revealed that he was Princess Zelda all along. Looking back, it's kind of obvious, due to there not being like a young blonde boy anywhere in the child timeline that would have taken over the mantle. Though, that might have been a good idea, Nintendo. And if we were able to change something, that's one of the things I might do is like I just have a young boy running around Kakariko Village doing flips or something, and he's like, oh, I want to grow up and be a hero one day, and you're like, oh, that's Sheik, cool. One theory that I enjoy is that Sheik is a mask. Zelda put on this ancient mask and is transformed into a fallen Sheikan warrior, so much like the transformation masks seen in Majora's Mask. Regardless.
See, because that could work, because you give the Kakariko mask, or the Kokori mask, to the one guard, that his son's really interested in it.
Oh,
so you kind of spin it that way. Like, I mean, instead of doing the Pokemon reference, you do a Sheik reference. Drop that, kind of drop that hint, maybe. I don't know.
And no, that's a good thought, but you're right. There's something about like that young boy that we never see. Maybe he did grow up. You know, he lives in Kakariko Village. He could identify as a Sheikan. But regardless, making Zelda an ally that helps us throughout our adventure was a giant leap. She wasn't just a damsel in distress. She had agency and was independent. Silly as it is to say, this was a big step forward for video games. Women were kind of just the sprite you saw at the end that kissed your hero, and that's all they got. Here, she actually had agency. She was a part of the story, and that's kind of cool.
Yeah, really well done. And also, it's like, I mean, like essentially the kingdom fell, and she was still alive and kicking and strong, and didn't need somebody to like she had what's her face, the Impa, like keeping an eye on her, but it never felt like Sheik needed to be like looked after. Like Sheik was Sheik and took care and came and went as he pleased, till we were like you almost like looked up to him when you're playing like Link, and then you realize you're like, oh, I'm looking up to Zelda. What a twist. It's like very cool that it made showed that when Link was stuck, frozen in time, Zelda was out developing and being a real badass. So it's cool, very awesome.
Sweet. On the other hand, though, we have Ganondorf. Not the pig monster from the first few games, but a man with a plan. He is shown to be cunning and have his own devious plans. It isn't until the final battle that the monster form is revealed, which basically rewrote the history of this iconic villain. And by changing the way Zelda and Ganon were presented in the games, Nintendo took big strides into the world of video game storytelling. These changes aren't seen as big leaps, but they kind of are, at least for the time. And it is interesting that Breath of the Wild, which is considered to be the best Zelda game, undoes these changes. They leave Zelda as a damsel in distress, and Ganon as kind of this faceless evil monster that you fight at the end of the game. Right? And it's kind of one of those things where it's like, what do video game players want? Right? So
I think that the way this established Ganon as having his pig form and having his evolved stage, and I think that's a really cool monster design, and that's all very obviously always going to be what the big boss is. But it's nice that story-wise he was always working the scenes, and he was just a guy. He was just any old guy but just so happened to be came from the desert, and he was evil and had this maniacal plan to overthrow the whole kingdom from the beginning. So super cool. And it turns out at the end that he's super powerful. He's the big giant pig monster that can basically is way bigger than every other NPC combined, to a point where man, if it wasn't for Link, who would stop this guy? Is anyone even strong enough? Like, yeah, so like even just scale wise, he's domineering. He's the essence of the power that he has is the Triforce of power, and I think that like they really did try to hammer home what each Triforce represents in the character. Like for him, Ganon's Triforce of power, he is huge. He's just scale wise, he's swings and he takes out, like if he hits you, he will knock you back and wreck your day. Zelda's wisdom, because it takes a smart and cunning person to survive such hardships, as well as guide those who need it. And Link is courage, so he does the whole, he actually has to try to stand up to this giant powerful monster, but with a calm guide at his side, he has the power to do it. So very cool. I like that they did do that, and they did try to make a focus on the story of this. And it is a shame that in Breath of the Wild they do take a huge step back. But I think that it goes to show that Breath of the Wild is a little bit more about the gameplay and the innovation that it brought to the table. And that's what we were needing at the time. Whereas,
and like I'm just gonna.
Yeah,
sorry, I could just step in. I'm not saying Breath of the Wild is bad. The narrative of that game obviously isn't the focus. It is. You're right. It's the gameplay. It's the roots back to adventuring. Right. It's supposed to be Zelda 1, where it's. I mean, there's videos online. You can guys will just like go from the Great Plateau and fight Ganon and win. Right. Like it's a possibility that you can do that. So I'm not saying that Breath of the Wild is bad by any means. I just was saying that it's interesting how you don't really want a narrative in Zelda, and these guys were trying to push it forward, right? So
absolutely, but I think they were almost doing, like, both games gave us what we needed at that time. What we needed was a strong 3D adventure, and how to realize a world in 3D and control and establish that, as well as like how do you tell a story. So they almost like introduced these little cutscenes and stuff, and it really gave the template of how to make a 3D game just to every game designer in the world. And Breath of the Wild, on the other hand, gave us we have all these tools and we can create these big worlds, but what do you do with it? Yeah. And I think Breath of the Wild gave us put the power in the players' hands and let them create. So I think that's they each gave us what we needed at the right time. So there's no negativity. Like, these games are fantastic, and I'm thankful to be able to replay them anytime I want. So
yeah, and again, with Breath of the Wild, I'm actually looking forward to maybe picking it up and playing through a new file in the near future. I'm just wrapping up, I think, Super Mario 3D World or something on the Switch, and that might be my next exercise bike game is Breath of the Wild. So again, excited to go back to it. So no hate. Cool. As you were talking, in my mind, Ganon in the future has longer hair, and that's how you kind of distinguish him. He's kind of a little bit more clean cut. And for some reason, I feel like he's wearing dreadlocks, and it kind of seems like one of those guys in a midlife crisis where they're like, you know what, I'm going to get dreadlocks because that's a cool look for white people to have. I couldn't find any artwork to clarify, but that's how I was visioned. This is kind of Ganon at the end of his ropes, and he's like, man, I'm just bored. I guess I'll get dreadlocks? That seems weird. Yeah,
he definitely does look a little bit more disheveled, but it almost feels like the false person that he was presented when you first see him.
Yeah, 100%.
When he's kneeling to the king, it that side's come out, and the powerful Ganon truly is who his real form is. He is a monster to the core. And I think that, him sitting in his golden tower was really just a facade. And him playing his organ, trying to be all, enlightened, really gives you that almost like mirrors of Dracula in Symphony of the Night, where you roll in and he's sitting there on his throne drinking wine, being all classy. And then, as soon as you tilt him, he's just no, monster time. And the true, what his true side almost comes out. Same thing with this. So very cool.
Yeah, very, very cool indeed. Awesome. So with that, kind of wraps up we're done. Again, we're going to come back. We're going to discuss, we got side quests, we got a randomizer, and we're going to kind of look between the N64 and the 3D version and just kind of give our like rundown kind of favorite moments, notable moments. I've got the notes going. I will send those out to Tyson within the next month. We'll get that recorded, and we'll be talking to you then. Till then, that's it. We kind of wrapped up a big one today. So, Tyson, do you have anything? Did we miss anything?
James Bond. And eventually I'll have to stop saying it because that movie will come out eventually. Sweet.
Nice. Awesome. So with that, yeah, see you guys in a couple weeks. I think we're playing something. I think we're playing a fun game. It's a game, hopefully, if you're an avid listener and you like old video games, you'll be like, oh, great, they're finally talking about that one. That's a fun game. And then a month, we'll kind of wrap this up, and then we're going to start into Majora's Mask in about 2 months. So that's where we're at. So if you're catching us, whether it's YouTube, iTunes, follow along. If you have feedback, send it to us, like always. And cool, go from there. All right, so without further ado, I guess we say bye and get out of here.
See you, everybody.
Okay, bye.